Alright, so today's video is going to be something a little different. I'm going to go over my ankle fracture / surgery recovery story to try to maybe bring some optimism to people who are going through the same thing, or will unfortunately will end up happening to them maybe one day. So I fractured my ankle April 25th of this year from a crushing injury. A car I was working on cars my whole life. But to give you an idea of what happened, if you only change a tire, you could understand. So basically, on the front of the car, the tire's off and doing some brake work. And the car came off the jack stands. And, I'm sitting down on the ground. My legs are folded, out. So the brake rotor, the whole knuckle assembly, the whole front of the car comes down on top of my ankle. The part of the ankle that it came down on was on the inside of my right ankle, kind of the area where that ball is, that nub part of your ankle. That's what's holding the car up off the ground. I was luckily able to reach my phone. It was by the window cowl. My wife works from home, luckily, and I was in our garage. And I called her, and she was able to get the car off of me, and then immediately went to a urgent care ortho specialist place, and was pretty fortunate that the surgeon was making his rounds that day and was able to kind of diagnose the injury and as well as schedule surgery. So the type of fracture I had was a bimalleolar fracture. The surgery that was performed is the ORIF. I think that's open reduction internal fixation surgery. 3 screws and a plate were put in. So when I initially went in to the ortho place, I was fortunate enough, we had some crutches in the house from when my wife had fractured her foot. By the way, I would recommend that crutches suck, and a walker. I recommend getting a walker. I'll talk about that in a little bit, and I'll put a link in the description to the video of the walker that I had, which was just from Walmart. You should be able to get it off the shelf immediately. So go into the ortho place, get an x-ray done. Obviously, I didn't stand on my ankle, couldn't put any pressure on my ankle, which was a good thing I didn't, because if I had put pressure on my ankle, any weight on it, I could have made the injury significantly worse. So get the x-ray. Immediately he's like, yeah, you're going to have to get surgery, and I think we can schedule something this week, which we did. I think it was 3 days later. What had basically happened, a crushing injury had happened. Basically, the way to look at it, if you've ever worked on a piece of wood or something like a 2x4, and you're supposed to pre-drill the hole, and you don't, and it splits it down the center. That's what had happened to that nub, that bone on the inside part of my ankle. It had just basically cracked it straight down the center, and it caused a little bit of a shift. That type of fracture creates a lot of instability in the ankle. You basically have no stability in the ankle whatsoever at that point, which is why you have to have the surgery done. And if I had put weight on that foot, which there's no way I could have done it. If you breathed on it, it hurt. There was no way on earth I was going to put weight on that. But it would have caused a shift in that bone and done a lot more damage. So, if you do break your ankle, or you think you broke your ankle, don't try to be Superman and walk on it, because you can make the injury significantly worse. Get an x-ray first. So that had happened. So I got the surgery, they put a cast on it that day, a soft cast, put that in there. So I was in that cast for about, I was in that cast for 3 days, went in for surgery. Had the surgery performed. This is where the optimism comes in, okay? Before I had the surgery, I was told I was going to be in a hard cast for probably at least 6 weeks. It was going to be a hard cast for 6 weeks. I do a physical job on my feet. Probably wouldn't have been back to work in 4 to 5 months, but I was back to work in 9 to 10 weeks, and that's what this video is really about. Is about that optimism of your situation may not be as bad as you think it is. So 2 weeks after they performed the surgery, he was so impressed with my bone health, bone quality. That's why I'm going to talk about towards the end of this video about the importance of you really should be taking care of yourself. You know, work out, weight lift, and improving your health is really important in case one of these things do happen to you. You'll have a much better recovery. So I went from 6 weeks of being in a hard cast to 2 weeks because my bone quality was so good. Everything went together perfectly. I had 3 screws and a plate put in. They did a nerve block that day before the surgery, which was very nice. It basically pretty much guaranteed me no pain for 24 hours. Actually, it was pretty pain-free for 48 hours after surgery due to that nerve block. It will make your leg feel very heavy, but it absolutely does a great job. I sent home with some painkillers, had a whole bunch of antibiotics I had to take for a while. So 2 weeks ago, going for follow-up at the ortho place. I mean, I thought they would do a follow-up x-ray at that point. They did not. I immediately went from a hard cast, they cut you out of it, and went into a walking boot or cam boot, whatever you would like to call it. You know, the full one that basically goes right below your knee. I'm sure you've seen some people walking around in those at some point in your life. And I was told I could fully weight bear in that boot. And basically, pain be my guide. Maybe an hour a day of walking, if that. First 2 days, I couldn't walk in it. I just didn't have the coordination. It felt very awkward. Trying to, it was just very difficult. So I was using a walker, and then eventually, by day 2, I kind of figured out how to, you know, walk in it, and I was walking in it. You know, probably about 30 minutes that day. And I kind of just built my way up. And I got to the point I could get around the house just fine. I could walk around outdoors a little bit just fine. You know, I was getting around. Obviously, you know, I couldn't drive or anything. You're not supposed to drive in the boot, and you shouldn't be taking your boot off to drive in case you have to do a panic stop, something like that. You could end up, you know, damaging your ankle. So, you know, I couldn't drive or anything like that. I was, you know, basically kind of stuck at home unless my wife drove me somewhere. So at that point, I went from, I was in that cam boot for 4 weeks, only 4 weeks, fully weight bearing. I didn't have to use any, you know, do the partial like 25%, 50%. I'm sure you've read that maybe online. If you've already broke your ankle and you're watching this, you've probably seen like, oh, you know, partial weight bearing. No, I was full weight bearing in that cam boot. And I was in that boot for 4 weeks. At the 4 week points, now I'm 6 weeks out for surgery, I go in for a follow-up. At this point, they do a follow-up x-ray, you know, and I'm on my feet, bare feet, you know, on their platform getting an x-ray done. And come in, looks great. So one of the best recoveries they've ever seen. They showed me the 3 screws and a plate that were in there, showed me where the fracture originally was, and it was basically completely healed. There's a little bit of area where the bone hadn't filled in, but he's like, yeah, at this point, you can transition into regular shoes. Pain is your guide. Okay. I mean, I'm a type of person, I go straight into it. I'm immediately into regular shoes. I never went back to the cam boot after that. I'm going to give you a tip on the cam boot too about something to make the experience a little bit better in those, because they are kind of hot and a little uncomfortable. It's just annoying to wear those things. They're heavy. So I'm full weight bearing at this point in regular tennis shoes, literally 6 weeks after surgery. So I went from potentially being in a hard cast for 6 weeks to being in regular shoes in 6 weeks. And it's not just because I got lucky. It has to do with partially of how I took care of myself prior to the accident and how I handled myself through the recovery process. So at that point, I am in regular shoes and I say, okay, when can I go back to work? Now I'm on a physical job. I'm in and out of a work truck all day. So I do a lot of driving, but also I'm on my feet doing physical labor. And this is not an office job. If I had an office job, I could have been back to work in like 2 weeks. Wouldn't have been ideal. Probably should have still been out of work a little bit longer than that because I need to elevate my leg quite a bit. But he said, well, probably let's give it 2 or 3 weeks. So I was back to work from the time I broke my ankle to back at work about the 9-week point. And when I originally had my injury, it seemed like I wasn't going to be able to go back to work for probably at least 16 weeks. So I was back to work at 9 weeks. And the first 2 weeks were a little uncomfortable. They were not fun. It was sore. I mean, it was definitely uncomfortable, but I got through it. And after about that 2 weeks of being back to work, I adjusted, and the pain became very minimal after that. And it just constantly got better. And they pretty much told me straight up, like, hey, this is a pretty serious injury. Don't expect to be 100% pain-free or to be to the point where it's never on your mind anymore for like a year out. But I can really say now, it really doesn't bother me much at all. I'm able to do whatever I want to do. So I want to, this next part, so that's kind of the injury part of what happened. So that kind of gives you an idea of kind of what to expect. I did do a physical therapy thing. All I needed to do one appointment. Just give me some exercises to do, which I was kind of already doing. I'll have some links in the description of the video to some like bands and stuff that more likely you're probably going to end up getting recommended anyway, just to get those. But when I went into the physical therapy appointment, they measure your range of motion in your ankles, and they're going to compare it to your other ankle as well, your non-injured ankle. I had identical ranges of motion in both ankles, so I lost no range of motion. The physical therapist was impressed. You're good to go, no problem. She says, the fact that you probably pushed yourself is probably one of the reasons why, you did as well as you did. I'm not telling you to push yourself, okay? You could, that's not what I'm saying, but that's what I chose to do. And for me, it was beneficial. I know my body, and I know that I can handle that type of stuff. So before we get to the next part, which is going to be, I'm going to cover basically in two areas. I'm going to cover the why you need to improve your health part and some tips on the recovery process. And then I'm going to close it up with kind of the financial aspect of it, because look, this is America, right? I mean, there's a financial aspect to getting hurt. So one of the things I'm going to recommend for your cam boot, I'll put a link in the description of this, is these are walking boot socks. So these are socks specially made for walking cam boots. They're a thicker sock. They're shaped a little bit differently. They go all the way up, basically up to underneath your knee. They're a little thicker, a little more padded. And they held up the entire time during I was in that walking boot, and they're definitely better than regular socks. And it'll definitely make the experience a little bit better to prevent that boot from rubbing on your leg. So yeah, I'll put a link in the description. These were cheapest. 3-pack was like $10, I think. So I'd probably recommend getting like 2 packs. Change it out every day, because they do get, those cam boots are hot. They get quite sweaty. Of course, I didn't have to sleep in it, luckily. So that helped. So let's get on to the recovery tips, and then I'll move into why you need to improve your health. So the recovery tips are keep your darn leg elevated. Really can't stress that enough. You've got to keep your leg elevated. They're going to stress that to you too. I ended up sleeping on a couch. It was just easier. Our bed's pretty high up off the ground, and it was just simpler being closer to the ground. I took 2 pillows and then stacked them on top of each other and just basically put my whole leg on top of that to keep my leg elevated. And that definitely helped quite a bit. Anytime I'd put my leg down, especially when I was at hard cast for a couple weeks, it would start to hurt because, the blood flow, and it would start to swell. Keeping that leg elevated will keep that swelling down, and it will definitely help with that pain reduction, because a lot of that pain that you're having is that swelling and inflammation. So keep your leg elevated. Sleep with your leg elevated is very important. Minimize keeping your leg down. I mean, one of the reasons why, if you have an office job, you may not be able to go back to work unless you're in a situation where you keep your leg elevated, because there's no way you can be able to keep your leg down all day. That's going to be really bad for you. So I don't recommend that. Next thing, I think you should get a walker. They're much easier to use. Don't feel bad. A lot of people don't have the coordination for crutches. And crutches are just, crutches as a whole, they're just uncomfortable. They're hard to use. They're difficult. You can easily slip and fall with one. They're really not that great. They're stupid, in my opinion. They really are stupid. A walker is a superior tool with your mobility. Just get a walker. They're cheap. You can go to Walmart today and get one off the shelf for like $50. works just fine. You know, to get up, if you got stairs, people are like, oh, but I can't use a walker upstairs. I wouldn't recommend using crutches upstairs. You scoot your butt up, you crab, you sit there and you scoot your butt up and you use your arms to lift your butt and you push yourself up the steps. And you do the same thing going down the steps. You just butt scoot down the steps. Way better than trying to go up the steps of crutches and fall over and hurt yourself. Seriously, just butt scoot up, butt scoot down. Use your arms, use them triceps, push yourself up. Luckily, our house, bedroom's downstairs, but I went outside plenty of times. I went down the steps. Just boot scoot. So, keep your leg elevated, get a walker. One of the things that they recommended me was take vitamin D. I'll leave that up to you. Maybe your doctor will say that or bring it up, but he did recommend us take vitamin D, help with bone healing. I was already taking vitamin D anyway. So that's kind of really, there's not much tips. Keep your leg elevated. You know, when you do start doing physical therapy, or as soon as your doctor recommends, or physician assistant, whoever starts recommending you doing exercises, start doing them. They recommend me as soon as I was in that cam boot, hey, at nighttime, you don't have to sleep with it. Just try to move that ankle back and forth, rotate it around, back and forth, rotate around, which I did every night. I also did it in the morning as well before I put the boot back on. You know, I was able to get into the shower just fine by myself. Pretty much able to get around the house by myself pretty well. A knee scooter can be helped. My job luckily had like a knee scooter that they kind of give out to people, and I was able to get a knee scooter. Those things are nice. They can kind of put a rash on your knee if you're using it too much, but it definitely allowed me to get around the house a little bit quicker. So let's get to the health aspect. Health aspect is, look, we kind of live in, this may offend some people, but you know what? It's called tough love. Get over it. We live in a world where we accept morbidly obese acceptance, and that's just stupid. It's beyond stupid. There's nothing healthy about being massively overweight, and I'm not talking about BMI. I'm talking about body fat. Okay, if you get muscle, it's not hurting you, but if you got it, but you know what I'm talking about. There's nothing healthy about being morbidly obese, shoving Pepsi and Mountain Dew, Doritos, and donuts down your throat. Period. There's not, and it shouldn't be accepted. You don't have to be harsh to people, but it's bad for you. It's bad for everyone around you, and it's bad for healthcare system, and it makes this country weak. You need to improve your health, because if I had been a typical obese American who weighs 300 pounds, who has never picked up a weight in her darn life, this recovery would have been a completely different world. I would have not been on my feet out in the cam boot in 2 weeks. I would have been at hard cast for 6 weeks. Instead of being back to work in 10 weeks, I may have been lucky to get back to work in 20 weeks. My bones are a lot stronger because I weightlift. Weightlifting improves bone density. That's a fact. That's why they stress elderly people to do some weight training. It helps prevent osteoporosis. It's very important for bone density. Being the fact I'm 185 pounds when the injury happened allowed me to have the strength that I could hold myself up with one leg, and also the fact that I weightlift, my leg is also stronger. Someone who's really overweight, they may not be able to hold themselves up with one leg, one because they have so much weight to hold, and also because they don't have the muscles necessary to do so. The heavier you are, the harder it's going to be to recovery from any type of fracture that's weight bearing. So I'm not talking about your wrist or your arm, but if it's your foot, your ankle, your leg, anything where you're pushing weight on, the heavier you are and the more out of shape that you are, the more difficult that recovery process is going to be, the longer it's going to take. And you may end up with these people who end up with these type of injuries who never recover, who are always in chronic pain. I think part of that has to do with how bad of shape they were before the injury and how bad of shape they currently are. If you're 300 pounds, it's a lot of weight you're putting on your ankle. That's just a tremendous amount of force. So this isn't to pick on anyone or anything like that, but understand I was the type of person who thought nothing bad would ever happen to me. This was the first surgery I've ever had in my life at 32 years old. Things can happen. Okay, so improve your health. Go to the gym. Do some weights in your bedroom. I don't care what you do. Do something. Get yourself in better health, because bad things can happen, and being in better shape can make a huge difference. And being in better health is not a privilege. It's a choice. You choose to eat donuts. You choose to eat Doritos. No one is forcing you. Maybe a little harsh. May not like it. I don't care. It needs to be said. Let's get into the financial aspect, and we'll close this out. Finances. Okay, we live in America. Obviously, this is not a country where healthcare is not free. You're not gonna necessarily. You're not guaranteed to get paid if you get hurt. And this can make the injury worse, because not only are you physically hurt, you're now financially getting hurt. So what can we do to potentially prevent that? And I understand this part here. I understand that everyone can't do this. I fully understand, more than you realize. But I'm just telling you my experience, and trust me, I'm no one special. Like, I have a mediocre blue collar physical job. It's in a job anyone could do. You really don't have to have. You don't have any qualifications to do it, or anything like that. So, when I broke my ankle, I was definitely stressed out about work. I've never been to a point where I was out of work for any extended period of time. I was stressed out about the financial aspect of it. I knew that my maximum out of pocket was $3,500. So I was like, okay, this is probably the worst deal it cost me is $3,500. I was fortunate enough that my work does have an HSA option, which I did choose because I don't have routine doctor visits. I didn't need a copay plan. I was better off with the HSA plan, which actually did have a lower out-of-pocket maximum, because they wanted you to kind of get to that, because it cost the employer less money overall. But I got $750 each year I was signed up for it, and I had been in that plan for 2 years. I hadn't used it at all, and it had $1,500 in it. So that lowered my maximum out of pocket down to like $2,000. I then applied for FMLA, and I'm going to talk about FMLA for a bit. There's a lot of people who job hop. You don't ever hold a job for an extended period of time, and there can be a cost to that besides benefits. Eventually it starts to look bad in your resume, like, why can't you keep a job for an extended period of time? But to get FLMA, one of the requirements is you have to be at that employer for at least 12 months, so a year. I believe it also has to have 50 employees within a certain radius. So if you work for really small employers, this isn't really going to matter. But 50 employees is really not a whole lot, especially within a certain radius. So I had been there for 8 years. Wasn't an issue. We had like 1,400 employees, no issues. But where I work at, I earn sick time and vacation time, and I never use my sick time, and it constantly builds up. And I had a lot of sick time. And I said, I know sick time is not really meant for extended periods of time. It's meant for short little, a day here, a day there. And they said, well, if you get FLMA approved, you can use your sick time or vacation time and get paid the entire time. I had enough sick time. I got paid the entire time. For like 9 weeks, I received a full paycheck the entire time. Exact same way. It was just coded different. I had FLMA next to it. I was paid the entire time. How can you end up in that situation if you're ever worried about, what if something happens to me, or it happens to a spouse or something like that, a partner? And that is, I chose a job where benefits outweigh the pay. So I chose a job where, hey, I know I'm going to make less money. I know there's opportunity cost, significant opportunity cost, and I'm really not doing something I want to do. But at the end of the day, my benefits are pretty good, and I have really good worker protection. So that's something, that is something that you can kind of choose a lot of times, pay or benefits. And there's plenty of times people will go to, like, in certain sectors where people will choose the highest pay versus some people will choose benefits. And I chose benefits, and where I work at is always hiring. I'll give you a hint. Your local government, municipality, city and state governments, they're pretty much always hiring and desperate for people, and part of that is because they really don't pay enough to really attract anybody. And a lot of elderly people who had those jobs for 30 plus years have all retired and left out. So there's a lot of openings. I'm just giving you a hint. There's a way that pretty much anyone can get one of the jobs that I have. My wife's employer happens to have a lot of accident plans. And she signs up for them and she pays for the premium ones, and she added me to them. Well, kind of like Aflac. It's not Aflac. There's different ones out there. There's ones that cover cancer, ones that cover injury, accidents, etc. She has a few of them, and I'm on them as well. So did that and submitted all the paperwork. Now for her, it's a little easier because she has her own insurance, and if you have an accident plan that's tied to like your insurance or something with your employer, a lot of times it's easier. Things can kind of go on autopilot because we have two separate insurance companies. It made it a little more difficult. I had to get all the billing and coding from the medical offices, like the stuff they actually send to the insurance company. It has all the codes for billing. They have billing codes, diagnostic codes, stuff like that. So it wasn't hard. They sent them to us in the mail. They were having some technical issues with their email and stuff, so I actually sent it the old school in the mail, and we just faxed those to the company, and I got more than reimbursed, because these things are not about reimbursement. They're about, okay, if you have this type of injury, you get this much money, etc. type of deal. And let's put it this way, I got more than enough money to pay off my medical bills and then some. So this injury actually didn't cost me at all financially, and I know that, hey, not everyone is going to have that option. Look, I spent years of my life working in fast food, okay? I fully understand the struggle more than you realize. I've been at the bottom for a long time in my life, and I still feel like I'm kind of at the bottom now. I just happen to have a job with, good benefits, and I have a great partner as well, which made the process a lot better. So I know it's a long video, and probably a lot of people just find this ridiculously boring, but maybe if you're stuck at home with a broken ankle, this wasn't so bad. So kind of wrap it up like, hey, look, just because you read on Google or WebMD, whatever, I broke my ankle, you're not going to be able to do anything for 20 weeks. Don't believe that. It could be 20 weeks. Could be longer. But you could be like me and be back to work at 9 weeks. And I darn sure couldn't find anything on any website, Reddit, whatever, where people were back to work at 9, 10 weeks doing a physical job. There was a lot of doom and gloom. People just made the process a lot worse than what it was, a lot more painful. And it was annoying. It was definitely an experience. Made me a stronger person, though. Improved my wife and I's marriage. You realize, hey, you can depend on other people a little bit. I made it through it. It's in the past. I'm over it. And it's an experience I can share. Next part is, hey, improve your health. And I'm sorry if that offends people, but the reality of it is look, there's certain things that we have no control over in life whatsoever, but what you put in your mouth and the physical activity that you do, you absolutely do have a choice. To say you don't have time, I'll be honest with you, during the work week, I sleep an average of 4 hours a day during the work week. So if you're sleeping 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day, or you're sitting down and watching, the Real Housewives or the Kardashians, or watching one of these stupid singing shows on Fox, which is just, don't even get me started on that trash, and actually calling it entertainment. You have time to work out. You can do something. And the third thing is, hey, maybe try to, if you can, improve your financial situation, and think about what would you do if you got hurt or your spouse got hurt. What could I do differently to put myself in a better situation to handle that situation? And you can make decisions and focuses on that. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult if you have kids, and you have a lot of other responsibilities that you've already built up with a certain lifestyle that you may not be able to change or want to change. But if you're starting out, that's definitely a decision you can make. So anyway, I hope maybe someone finds this beneficial. I'm sure it'll get some hate because maybe I'm a little harsh on people with their health decisions. But until next time, I really do hope y'all have a good day.